Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I have a very special guest, one of my best friends, Maddie. I've known Maddie since about first grade. We used to play all different sports together. We go to school together. Yeah, and Maddie is also my book soulmate.
It's true.
Yeah, we like a bunch of the same books. We have really common tastes. We like fantasy, new adult, kind of all that stuff. So she's joining me today for this very special video.
Yeah, thanks for introducing me and for having me. I'm really happy to be here and to talk about some of my favorite books. And you and I talk a lot about them, and it's really nice to put it on camera.
Yeah, so as you can see from the title below, we're going to be talking about our favorite and least favorite books that we've read this year. So let's get into it. So Maddie and I each made a list of our favorite and least favorite books, and we didn't have too much overlap. But the first book we're going to talk about, one of our least favorite books of the year, is Normal People by Sally Rooney. So in Normal People, we have our two main characters, Marianne and Connell, and they go to high school together. Marianne is kind of more of this quiet, nerdy, like loner girl, and Connell is more part of the like popular crowd. He like plays a sport, he's like, you know, going out partying, but Connell's mom works for Marianne's parents, so they see each other when he goes to pick his mom up from Marianne's house, and through kind of that situation they realize that they're actually interested in each other and they're curious and they want to learn more, and from that they actually start hooking up. And then once they graduate high school, they end up going to Trinity College in Dublin together, where their dynamic kind of switches, and Marianne kind of falls in with the more popular crowd, and she has a bunch of friends and she's going to the parties, where Connell kind of feels like maybe he doesn't truly belong and he can't kind of find his groove. And so you see kind of like their dynamic switch, where he kind of goes from like this popular person and being embarrassed of Marianne, whereas now she's kind of the popular person, and you know, how does she kind of approach that dynamic with him now that she's the one with all these friends and he's kind of like the loner kid that people don't know of.
The reason I put this at the top of my least favorite book list is because I felt like it was really hyped up for me, and I had seen that the Hulu show was really well marketed. So I saw the trailer for that and I immediately ordered the book, and I was reading a lot of reviews on Goodreads and on Amazon, and I was just so excited to finally read this book and finally get to know the story and these characters. And when I finally got it, I was just really shocked at the level of literacy in it, because it felt very childlike. Some of the things they would say, some of the thoughts they would have, it just didn't feel like a functional relationship, obviously, but it also I felt like the writing could have been a lot better for the way that it was so promoted and liked by other people.
Yeah, so I agree. I think part of the problem was definitely that it was overhyped to begin with. Like when I went to go read it, everyone was like, this book is so good, like it's so real, it's so authentic, like you're gonna love it, it's great, it's not too long, like you'll fly through it. I did read it pretty fast, but not because I thought it was like so good I couldn't put it down, but because kind of what you were saying, it was really easy. It didn't like have any challenges in it, which is fine. Like I don't mind an easy book. Sometimes I even like easy books, but this one I just felt was like frustrating in the way that like every single one of their problems stemmed from communication problems, and I'm like, maybe if you just had a conversation, all of the issues would be solved, and like that's just so annoying.
Yeah, and I think people are clearly drawn to reading about and watching dysfunctional relationships. But when it comes to this kind of childlike behavior in a relationship, it's just really frustrating as an adult when we're reading this book, because I feel like there's just no emotional intelligence whatsoever with these characters, and you really just want to sometimes slap them and be like, grow up a little bit. You're acting like you're 5 years old.
Meanwhile, they're like almost out of college towards the end. They're like graduating college, and that's something that bothered me too. Is like, okay, if it was like they couldn't figure it out in the beginning because they were still young, but the book really, like, they age in the book. Like I think they go from like seniors in high school to like graduating college maybe, and it felt like they didn't grow, they didn't learn, they didn't really develop. The same problems they had senior year of high school are the same problems they had, you know, post college.
Yeah, and I mean, besides like a clear lack of an ability to communicate, these characters are so prideful that that's also impeding their ability to progress in their relationships, and it's really evident. Their inability to communicate and act properly around each other and with each other also translates to their relationships with other family members, with friends. You see the main character, Marianne, not even making right choices when it comes to picking her friendships either. She has a couple good ones, but most of them, she doesn't have a support system either. And it is really evident. And maybe that is another contributing factor to why she's unable to have a good relationship. Yeah.
And another thing that just bothered me, which is just like personal preference, was that the author didn't use like quote marks when a character was speaking to another character, which it just was a little bit confusing at first because I couldn't tell sometimes if it was like the character was thinking it or if they were saying it out loud.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this previously. You disliked that, and I actually liked it a little bit more because it felt like I was, standing next to them while they were having this conversation, and I was really a part of the conversation these characters were having. After a while, though, it does feel a little cliche and overused, and I've read that in other comments about the book, is that they're also like, why are you using this? Like, this isn't, this technique isn't as interesting as you think it is, basically. But I don't know. In the moment when I first read it, I was like, oh, this is a cool technique and cool approach to use. But yeah, it kind of fades after a while. Yeah.
So personally, I would not recommend this book. I just think there's so many better books out there that you could probably just pass on this one.
Yeah, and I think maybe watch the Hulu show instead.
Yeah, the show's not bad. My problem with that is the same problems I have with the book, where all their problems stem from this inability to just communicate and express themselves, and the same frustrations that I had in the book, where I was like when he wanted to stay there but didn't ask her, and then she didn't ask him because she expected if he wanted it he would ask, and it was like, are you kidding? Like, that's why you ended up breaking up. Like when that happened in the book and then when it happened in the show, I was just equally like, just grow a pair and just ask if you could stay there.
And I think there's at one point, and I'm paraphrasing here, but at one point Connell goes, clearly there's feelings here. It's obvious. And Marianne goes to who? So that kind of goes to show, like, there's literally no talking going on.
And she doesn't get it.
The other person is assuming the other's intentions, and that's leading to a lot of distrust and just a lack of understanding on each other's parts.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next book on my least favorite list is actually a series by Jennifer L. Armentrout.
That hurts my soul. I love her.
I'm sorry. I know. I love some of her work too, just not her earlier writing. And it's called The Wicked Trilogy. It's about Ivy Morgan, a 22-year-old college student who is also a part-time fae hunter. And
I love a good fae story.
The fae aren't as nice as they are in some of your other stories, though. And along the way, she meets a fellow fae hunter. And they embark on a romance together while mishaps occur, and
of course.
So I read the first book, and when I finished it, I was not at all impressed, but I decided to power through and read the second one because I thought that
maybe get better.
Yeah, JLA is really good at imaginative and interesting plot lines, and she's good at threading them usually. Not so much in this story. I didn't think that the ending really came together at all, and a nice little bow, and as compared to some of the other stories that she's written. And whereas the characters, their dialogue tends to be really cheesy. So the characters, super cheesy, dialogue, super cheesy, not at all how normal people would talk. I've talked to you about
normal people.
Full circle, call back. So you and I have talked about this before, how female writers will sometimes write dialogue for male characters, and it doesn't at all sound like how any men that we know would talk, and it sounds like exactly what we're saying, a female trying to write a male character, and it's really obvious, and it really takes you out of the story. And there were times when I was reading this book and I was just flabbergasted at the things that this guy was saying. I was like, nobody talks like this is so unrealistic. And also some of the references, the clothing she was wearing, I think she wore like lip gloss and bell bottoms at some point. I was like super dated. I was so confused.
That's my problem with contemporary stories a lot. Whereas if they're like 10 years out, they're like they're not awkward, but like it's like they're dated, and so it's like if it's a contemporary story, but then it's like, and then I flipped my phone open, and
I was
it's
just
like,
gonna say technology is like one of the number one things that can date a story so much.
Yeah,
but it was really the clothing.
Yeah, so that's why I really like stories that like take place before there's like electricity, because then it's like it's obviously dated. It's supposed to be.
I agree. Those kind of stories are timeless then.
Yeah.
So I had a big issue with that. And then towards the end, there were some really graphic and uncomfortable scenes that involved rape. Sexual assault definitely occurs in the series. Like I said,
trigger warning if you're going to read the Wicked series, trigger warning for rape.
Yes, and like I said before, the Fae aren't as gentle as they are in some of the other stories we like to read.
In a nice Sarah J. Maas story.
Yeah. So similar to what our big issue was with normal people is that there was not a lot of communication. And I feel like you're going to see this with a lot of romances, is that all of their problems could be solved with communication, and
I hate that.
That obviously lends to this story as well, because it's such easy conflict for the author to create, even though it's not interesting for the reader to read.
It's annoying, honestly. Like, I don't think that should be the main issue of a couple. Like, if a couple like has a real issue and maybe sometimes they don't communicate great and it's like a little like sub issue, like okay, like it happens, but like if that is the only issue with a relationship, it's annoying.
I agree.
They just shouldn't be together.
Yes.
Like it's annoying.
Yes.
So the next book on my least favorite list, I'm probably gonna get some hate for this, but is The Nevernight Chronicles by Jay Kristoff. And before you come for me, let me just explain. So the first book is really good and it kind of goes just straight downhill from there. In the first book of the series, we follow our main character, Mia, and she was orphaned as a child. So after her parents are killed, she kind of makes it her life's mission to avenge her family, and she ends up traveling across the world to go to basically an assassin school called the Red Church, where they teach her to be like this almighty assassin. And in addition to that, she also possesses this like demon power where she can kind of like manipulate shadows, which makes her obviously an even like better assassin because she kind of has this like magical ability. So I thought the first book was really cool, was really interesting, and learning about these like magical shadow powers she has. And I thought the assassin school was so cool, and the character and her character just in general I really liked. I liked how she was kind of like this badass girl and like she doesn't give a fuck, but also she's doing this because she loves her family and she wants to basically avenge them. However, after the first book, I just did not like it at all. And I only finished it because I felt like I had to, not because I wanted to. It kind of just felt like it was just never ending, and there was problem after problem and problem after problem. And I just also don't like when there's a series of books that all have the same bad guy that's impossible to kill, impossible to kill, impossible to kill, impossible to kill. Oh, we killed him. And it's like, why was it so hard that whole time? And then you just did it. But yeah, and it's like hard too because I do really like the first book, but the second and third book were just, and also just to add on to this, it is a male author, kind of the opposite of what we just talked about. With female authors kind of struggling to write male voices, I felt like this male author trying to write like female on female love scenes, I was also like, what do you know about that? Like, you know what I mean? It just felt like, and I don't mind a steamy scene, like I'm in a sexy scene, I'm in it, but this was just like it was just like almost made me uncomfortable, and I was just like, this steamy scene isn't adding to the story. It's not like building their relationship, like, you know, or anything about the story. I didn't feel like it was adding to it. I felt like it was just like over the top and like it was just too much. And I just felt like it kind of took away from the story instead of adding to it because of that. So that's basically my thoughts on that. I would recommend to read the first book and just accept it at that and don't read the rest, because if you read the second and third, I kind of felt like it ruined the first.
Okay, so my next book on my least favorite book list of the year so far is Pestilence by Laura Thalassa in the Four Horsemen series. So the basic premise of the series overall is that the Four Horsemen have come to Earth and apocalypse is basically here and it's ensuing. Basically the entire premise of all these books is just completely bananas. It's insane. He's making his way through Canada, going from town to town, giving everyone the plague, killing off entire populations of people. Well, it's pestilence. Yes, on purpose. Yes. Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
Yeah, that's making sense now.
So the first one's Pestilence, second one's War. I don't know what it is after that.
I'm understanding now what I didn't understand.
Yeah. And so giving everyone the plague. So this, the main protagonist, Sarah, she decides to sacrifice her life to kill him. And at this point, there's no technology or electricity or anything, so there's no communication between people, so they don't know how other parts of the world are faring. So she tries to kill him. She does not succeed. He is immortal, and then he decides to bring her along on his journey as basically his plaything for torture. And yeah, that's the story. And then their love story is the crux of the book. Also, another thing is that since he's immortal and has lived since before
the beginning of time.
Yes, the beginning. He has no concept of human relationships, their values, their virtues, how they act on a day-to-day basis. So he basically has the personality of a newborn baby. And it's like really, really depressing to watch this. Yes, to watch this like fully grown, functioning female who was a firefighter and was all these like really badass things fall in love with a big man baby. And it's just like, I was grossed out, actually. I was like, this guy has no personality. It's like just creeping me out. And I don't know. Their relationship just did not work for me.
You weren't bought in.
Not at all. Okay, so anyways, the second book in the series is War, and that is the exact same plot line, except now it is war instead of pestilence.
And
killing people.
Does he like kidnap someone and they start a relationship?
Yeah.
Okay, so the
exact same thing over
cheated.
And over again. And I knew what I was getting into with Laura Thalassa because I read the Bargainer series, so I knew that it was very, like kind of cheap writing, but very smutty, very fun. But this was so out of my comfort zone for reading that I couldn't handle it, and I was rolling my eyes, and I basically ended up skimming large portions of the book because I thought it was so dumb, essentially.
That's fair. Yeah. So you wouldn't recommend the series?
I clearly read the second one, so I clearly saw something in it. I'm not sure exactly what it was that I saw at the time. I can't remember.
Maybe you were just hopeful.
I think I was just looking for something easy to read and to take my mind off all the crazy things that are going on in the world right now. So it definitely worked in that sense. It just wasn't enough to take my mind off the cheesiness and the insane stuff. Yeah. Which, you're obviously not reading it for a realistic depiction, but you want, a little bit of realism in what you're reading.
Yeah, you want it to be believable enough. Even if it's, fantasy and there's, wizards, you still want to believe in, at least their relationship, but it's, this is so absurd that, I just can't, I can't buy in.
Yeah. So I would not recommend this series. I'm sure there's other series that can... if you're looking for something fun, interesting and sexy, then there's definitely other series out there, and this is just not one that I would recommend.
Okay, so my final book on my least favorites list is A Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. Again, I'm probably going to get shit for putting this in my least favorites, but let me explain. It's a good book. It's honestly good. I would recommend it, but as a standalone book, I felt like it wasn't as strong as I wanted it to be. And again, I think it's one of those things where I heard so many good things about it, and I was so excited to read it. And then it kind of just fell flat. In this book, we follow our two main characters, Malik and Karina. And Malik is traveling to the city with his two sisters, and upon entrance to the city, his little sister gets kidnapped, and he makes a deal with his sister's kidnapper that if he kills the princess of this city, the guy will release his sister. On the other hand, Princess Karina is our other main character, and at the beginning of the book, her mom is assassinated, and she finds this book that has a spell that can bring people back to life, and so she is working on trying to kind of get all the ingredients she needs for the spell in order to bring her mom back. And throughout the book, our main characters, they come together, and kind of Malik realizes that this princess is a real human being and he doesn't know if he can follow through with this bargain that he's made. And Karina, on the other hand, is trying to resurrect her mom.
So that sounds interesting to me.
Yeah,
actually.
so I was so excited. I was like, that's dope. That's so interesting. Like, everything about it was really good. And again, I didn't think it was a bad book, but I felt like the beginning was slow and a lot of kind of information overload, which again is fine. She's building this fantasy world. She's got to introduce the world, describe it, introduce all these different characters, describe the dynamics between everything, introduce this kind of magical system and all the parties involved. So that's fair, right? But it's kind of hard to read when you're in the crux of it. And then kind of the second half of the book where everything's kind of happening, then instead of it feeling kind of slow and information overload, it went really fast. And I was like, wait, what? So I was kind of like, I wish it was a little bit less of this and a little bit more of this. And then at the end, I felt like, okay, so this was all a setup for the second book. And that's fine. And I'm really excited to read the second book. But those are all kind of the reasons that this kind of makes my least favorite list. So again, I think it's a good book. I do recommend it. I didn't feel like it lived up to the hype, but I'm really excited to read the second book because I do think that now having all this information that we got and learning these characters, we're going to go straight into the like meat of the next book, which I think will be really good.